It's NBA draft time. Of course it is. We're looking at a bunch of new prospects in this episode. So, Michael Bolton, let's do it.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd, and get ready for me to launch my new career in nerdcore hip-hop. I'm also the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter as always, at redrock_bball, on TikTok at redrock_bball, and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more right now. New customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That is $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Thank you also for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free. We are available on all platforms, so double bang, thumb it up, leave all of that great stuff here on the video, and that will give you good karma for everything that you do in life. Cody Williams on the docket for us today. Jalen, the Bronco Williams' brother. Kyle Filipowski, Hunter Salas. Some interesting prospects here. Bobby Clintman, a guy that we talked about last season as well quite a bit heading into the draft. So I'm going to talk about all those guys, and might as well just bring my guest in right now. All right, so he's back again from No Ceiling. Stephen Gillaspie is here with me. Stephen, welcome back to the show.
Josh, man, thanks for having me on. I know that you're going down the No Ceilings gauntlet. I'm just happy to be a part of it again this year, man. I'm excited to be on the show.
Yeah, I think you're the third No Ceilings guy so far. We've got a couple more of those guys coming up this week. You guys obviously all work together at No Ceilings, but it's not groupthink. It's not a hive mind. Everyone has very different opinions on a bunch of different players, and I think that's probably been more evident through this cycle with so much uncertainty regarding all of these guys right across the board. I asked some version of this question everywhere, Stephen, about the strength of this draft class and whether that's real or not and what that does. But I'll put this question to you. Is that I bring this up all the time, and I'll continue to bring it up, about the way that we have to sort of break our brains in terms of what is a regular top 3 pick, and the player we get at the 3rd pick now, that's maybe not the same as what it would be last year or the year before or any other year. But like, to get a different angle on that, like if you're talking about a player who, I think, I'm not sure how you think, I think Alex Sarr's like ahead of these guys. He's probably a top 5 pick, top 3 pick in most drafts. After that, I get a little bit more riffy. But if we're talking a player that's maybe a top 5 guy in this draft, is that like a back-end lottery player in, say, last year's draft? So how many guys in this draft would go ahead of like the top 6 guys out of last year's draft? Maybe that's a better way of phrasing it.
It's really hard to like pinpoint that, and I know that a lot of people kind of speak in such a declarative manner with that. It's just really hard because, I mean, a lot of these guys, they have, even the ones that are already in the NBA, they have a lot of runway left to go. You know what I mean? And like, you see what, Jalen Suggs was in a pretty decent draft class. A lot of prospects have come out of there and did well. He was getting like number 1 pick considerations in his class, and now he just made his first all defensive teams, second team selection. And I would say in hindsight, we probably would rank him a little bit lower than what we did going into a draft class. So these things always kind of wax and wane for me. But if I had to, to answer the question, I guess, so to speak, this class is lacking a lot of star power, but everyone is kind of hitting that same narrative. You know what I mean? So I don't think that by this point, there's all that many secrets about the strength or the perceived strength of this class. I do think that, as everybody else is kind of already putting out as well, there's a lot of role players to be had in this class, and there are going to be people that surprise out of this draft class that rise above their perceived ceiling. And, we're going to look foolish on some of these guys regardless, no matter how strong the class is going to be.
Always. It's always going to happen at some point. You're always going to look dumb on somebody. But the couple of things you mentioned there are really interesting. So we're going to cover some role player type guys in this show, and also talk about guys that, in terms of coming from nowhere, well, there's someone with a bit of a link to that sort of a prior draft trajectory in this show that we're going to get to. Of course, I'm talking Cody Williams and his brother Jalen Williams. We'll talk about that one coming up, but that's not where we're going to start. We're going to go to Duke. We're going to go to Kyle Filipowski, a guy whose name was in the draft last year, but of course ended up going back to school. And as has happened very often with so many of these players, maybe the exception is Klinger, but these players who went back to school, who were in the draft and thought they're going to get picked, and they pull themselves out, the buzz it's just not there. Like, it's just, you don't really hear, oh, wow, look where this guy did. Look what he did this season. And Filipowski's interesting. He's 7 foot, 22 and 11 per 40 minutes, almost 4 assists, 2 blocks a game, 27 usage player, a little bit of shooting there. He's a passing big man. I would, initially, the way everyone knows the process, or I think most people that watch this know the process that I do it, is I don't pay huge amounts of attention through the season, little bits and pieces. I come in the lottery, I've done about a week worth, and I do my initial mock, and then we spend the next 6 weeks going hard and adjusting projections. And I had Filipowski as a player that I liked as a center, higher than even someone like a Donovan Klinger, because I think that there is more versatility in his game. But then we had the combine, we had the poor wingspan measurement stuff with Filipowski. So I like his passing ability. I like that offensive and some defensive versatility there as well. But what's holding him back? Because it just doesn't seem like there's anyone really giving any buzz towards him at all.
It is really weird how the Filipowski, just dialogue has been kind of neutral. It's very lukewarm. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that he's perceived as like this dribble, pass, shoot guy, but the assist numbers aren't incredibly high. No. The 3-point percentage isn't where you would want it to be, although the shot looks clean, right? So with that being said, it's like the thing that we're proposing him being good at, he hasn't really put up the numbers that you would want to see. I do like him a lot, though. I'm with you, Josh. I have him 13th on my board right now. And we're kind of seeing him, and I think the combine has done him a disservice, because along with the wingspan, I mean, you're talking about a guy who recorded a 32.5-inch vert at the combine, and that kind of surprised me a little bit. But it does kind of show itself on the film. But when you do watch the film, I mean, there's a lot to be impressed with. Josh, I'd like to ask a question to you, if you don't mind. How many 7-footers in the NBA do you think have like the offensive skill set that Kyle comes into the league with?
Well, you're going to obviously immediately go with Joel Embiid. There's one of them, but Wembanyama, we'll do that. But there's not that many 7-footers who have that. Like he plays like he's. I don't know, I feel like he plays like he's 6'10", and that's obviously he's got the. I think he's got the negative wingspan by like half an inch. I think he measured at 6'11" without shoes. So he's is he truly a 7-footer? I guess he is, because we're obviously playing on the court with shoes on.
Sure.
Yeah, but I don't think there is that many that in terms of the diversity of the different things you can do at that height. Like Mitchell Robinson, 7 foot, he can't do that. Like Gobert can't do that. Who else is 7 foot tall? There isn't many. There isn't many.
So I think the comparison that I think is a pretty safe floor is like a Kelly Olynyk, right? Like someone who has been in the league for several years, who you can trust to have the ball flow through his hands and make a correct read, but you're not really someone who's orchestrating an offense, right? How we see guys like Şengün and, of course, Jokic as well. I think that the shot does look good, and typically I did like a little bit of a shooting piece for No Ceilings. And from what I found is like these top prospects or best prospects in the class, like typically NBA teams do a pretty good job of helping them develop into shooters. I mean, I talked about Jalen Suggs earlier. He went from being like a 21% 3-point shooter as a rookie to this year he's almost 40%. Like, I don't know if that's sustainable, but it happened, right? So Filipowski could develop into being a good shooter. And the defense is kind of hit and miss. I wish he was a little bit stronger in the paint. And maybe he does get that way as he develops, his like man strength or NBA strength as he gets older. But what was interesting to me is like among all big men who played about 80 minutes or minutes percentage, which equates to like a really good role in college basketball, he ranked 26 in block rate, right? Which is, again, like an under-discussed thing with him, that he's actually able to block shots despite not having incredible lift and not the sexiest wingspan that you would want to see. But he's effective in the paint. He has the shooting projection. The defense, I think, isn't that bad. I mentioned the help side projectability that he could have with his shot blocking, and I actually kind of liked his defending out in space a little bit. he is a little bit of an emotional guy. There's a
Yeah.
lot of times where calls wouldn't go his way. You could see him, be super demonstrative on the court, but I think that speaks to his like give a crap factor, for lack of a better term. I like him a lot. Like I said, I have him in the lottery, and I think combine season, where we don't have like this high visibility on like actual basketball games, it does some players like a Kyle Filipowski a little bit of a disservice. But again, 7-footer who can dribble, pass, shoot, that's a desirable skill set. Not a lot of players have that. And with a player of his size, like there's a lot of staying power just being in the NBA at his size. I think if I could draft Kelly Olynyk in this draft class in the lottery, like I would do that, right? So that's kind of where I am with Filipowski and what he's done this year.
I obviously like him. I had him relatively high. I can see that your dribble, pass, shoot, defensive ability, size makes sense in Oklahoma City, as if they're looking for a center who plays, because we don't expect huge amounts of stars or even necessarily immediate high level starters or anything like that. So like as a backup guy there to fill that spot, like to me that's great, and you can even go high. I really like what he brings. But there are concerns, obviously, with some of that wingspan stuff and the defensive stuff. But when you put him into look at like statistical comparisons, the number one guy that came up across on this site, which is it's called the NBA Draft Comp site, in the Advanced Comparisons tab and the Per 40 tab, the number one player both times was Jalen Johnson. Now, Johnson is a bit shorter, but it's that ability to pass a little bit, to shoot a little bit, to get some steals, to get some blocks, to get some rebounds. PJ Washington was the second best comp there. Okay, well, we're obviously seeing PJ do some of this stuff as well with some offensive versatility. So these guys are both shorter than Kyle, and that's, I guess, interesting to see that his game sort of is projecting, not projecting smaller, but it's showing that he does these small guy things like what you said at the start, like how many 7-foot guys do these things. They don't. It's the smaller, the 6'9s, the 6'10, 6'8 sort of players who play up small ball style. But he's got the heft, he's got the size, and he's not going to get pushed around or anything like that.
Yeah, I think that I wouldn't pick those comps if it was me just like watching film, but I can kind of see where you put Filipowski on a roster. I think you could even play him with like a traditional 5, you know what I mean? Or maybe even a 5-out system where he comes in off the bench, a little bit of 4, a little bit of 5, maybe kind of like a Naz Reid-esque role, to where you could kind of trust him in multiple spots. But the fact that he can open the floor up, not only for a big man, but we all know how important it is for like these jumbo creators that we see continue to populate the NBA. Just having spacing, having someone that can shoot reliably, that can pass reliably, and who I'm speaking really glowingly of his offense. And I've had a couple of people say, well, that must mean he's not like a really good defender. I think that Filipowski could be an okay defender in the NBA. And I think that if you're looking for a role player in the lottery, you can't really ask any more than just like a solid defender. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with Filipowski becoming a solid defender based on what we've seen on film.
Well, we'll take Alex Sarr out of the discussion here as like a big man, but like in terms of the higher end centers or the bigger name centers, you've got Klingon, there's Zach Edey, like people have him in the 30s, some people have him in the lottery, right? And there's Filipowski. Really, they're probably the 3 major, say, center type guys who have that profile and some draft stock as well. How would you place him amongst those 3 players?
I think Sarr is the number 1 pick in this year's draft class. I have Klingon like 4th right now. I'm still kind of hashing out that 4 through 8 range, trying to make my tiers a little bit more firm. But I have Filipowski right after those 2, and I think that after him, you start looking at players like Khalil Ware is another one who I'm kind of hearing buzz about one way or the other, kind of in a similar way. I just think that Filipowski, kind of under-discussed prospect, but I still value what he could bring in the NBA. And I think the NBA game is actually a little bit more suited to his skill set than what we would see from Duke traditionally.
That's probably true as well. We've got some other interesting guys to talk about. We'll get to that in a second. But today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. It is winner take all time right now in the NBA and in the NHL. Of course, playoffs going on, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to get a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That is $150. And you can bet that on spreads. You can bet it on money lines, on totals, on player props. You've got the futures there as well. Individual game bets, same game parlays, all that sort of stuff available over on FanDuel. Just get that initial first winning $5 bet and get $150 in bonus bets. So go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. And don't forget to gamble responsibly. Okay, so that will now bring us on to talk about Cody Williams, who is Jalen Williams' brother, a guy obviously in Jalen Williams who came through a bit unheralded, picked up a ton of steam through combine season, went in the lottery, which 3 weeks before the draft, I think most people would have said, top 20 maybe, finished second or third, I can't remember what it was, in Rookie of the Year, has taken his game to a new level, and now Cody Williams comes in as a freshman. Playing for Colorado. Now, let me ask you this basic question. Is there a part of the Cody Williams hype fascination that is brought about by the non-usual or unusual Jalen Williams development trajectory? Do you think that is playing a part? Well, if Jalen did it, then surely his brother's got an ability to do that. Do you think there's a part of that?
I'm not going to say that nobody thinks that way, but I would say based on conversations that I've had and talking with some of the other guys that know ceilings, there's like a clear line of demarcation from how people view Cody and how people had viewed Jalen, right? Where Jalen kind of later to the party type of prospect, but Cody was a pretty recognized and heralded player amongst his own abilities. You know what I mean? Now, I think that the physical growth that we've seen from Jalen in the NBA, like how quickly he was able to like add strength or take to the NBA, maybe teams are looking at Cody with some rose-colored lenses in that regard, just for the ability to get a little bit stronger and how quick they are to learn the game. But I think they play pretty different styles, and I mean Cody is actually a little bit longer and taller than what we saw from Jalen at Santa Clara.
Yeah, so he's got measured here 7'1" wingspan on Cody Williams, and that's part of the appeal of Jalen Williams as well, as having that big plus wingspan, and Cody's is huge. I will just, again, I'm going to devil's advocate a lot of this stuff. 6'8", forward, great. Age, great. Freshman, I love all that stuff. That's all very good. 20% usage, 21% three-point attempt rate, very low steal numbers with that wingspan, whereas part of Jalen's big appeal, especially in the NBA, is generating big steal numbers, big defensive event creator. It just feels like a lot of the Cody numbers here, yes, I know he's a freshman and playing alongside Tristan Da Silva, but I feel like some of it is the size is there, the wingspan is there, but the production, it's just at this point. And there's value in that, developing down the track, but a lot of the statistical comparisons for him are guys where you go, I'm not really that excited about that player. Isaac Okoro offensively, I'm not really that keen on that sort of a prospect necessarily, if that's where we're at. Is Cody offensive as a prospect? Is he defensive? Is it somewhere in between? What's his one thing? Because I look at those numbers and they're a bit sort of mid. They're just sort of sitting there.
I understand that, right? There are some advanced metrics or even traditional metrics that aren't really speaking glowingly of Cody, but I think that we need to speak a little bit, and I'm saying the royal we, right? We need to understand that there's a human element to basketball, and I mean, not really having much of a time to establish a rhythm due to injuries. I think that kind of played a little bit of part in what we saw from Cody, because before his injuries, he was looking fantastic, and he suffered a couple, a knee and a wrist and things like that. And when he came back after, you could see that he wasn't necessarily the same. But I think that, it takes a little time for young players to first time facing real adversity. You know what I mean? Your season starting strong, you're getting it taken away from you, so to speak, and you have to come back to where KJ Simpson is now all of a sudden getting NBA hype. And then, of course, you mentioned Tristan Da Silva, who you and Rucker talked about before. But I think Cody, the thing that stands out to me is, one, he's tall, rangy, and lanky with a frame that's suitable to add on some more mass that won't really slow him down. I love his nose for the rim, man. He's consistently on the attack for the hoop, whether the ball is in his hand or not. I love the way that, even though he didn't have the rock in his hand at Colorado to the point that where you'd want to see from some of these other freshman, that he still gravitated towards the rim. I mean, he's a great cutter, great at attacking angles. He was in the 89th percentile on cuts. I mean, in a small sample size, he did shoot 40% from deep. And now you could say, well, a small sample size, if you extrapolate that out, maybe that falls out. And of course, the free throw percentage being 71%, that's not necessarily speaking highly to the shooting touch. But I look at the way that he finished around the rim, high degree difficulty on some of these shots, finishing through contact and still finish with soft touches. His touch indicators suggest to me that he could be at least the league average shooter. And I'm with you, though, that the defense and the defensive consistency didn't really get a chance to get a lot of footing underneath it. With that being said, to answer your original question, I think that he is going to be more of an offensive prospect. And I think that he's got some good strengths right now. I just wish that we would have had an opportunity to see him be on the floor a little bit more, because I think the visibility also hurt his draft stock, let alone the ability to kind of like gain momentum throughout the year.
Correct me if I'm wrong on this, but before some of the injuries took place, wasn't he shooting like 50% from three over the first 2 to 3 months of the season, or am I just misremembering that?
No, he was shooting remarkably from all over the field.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, that it's almost unsustainable. I think Reed Shepard might have an argument with 50% from deep being unsustainable, but Cody was he had a great start to the year, and that's what I keep referencing back this on here and other shows and stuff like that I've done, that the lack of playing time really hurt him in his draft stock. I'm a big believer in him, though, Josh. I have him 6th on my board, because I think that once you get past a certain number of players in this class, I don't know if there's any other players that meet the age, thing that a lot of people are really big on who love freshmen, right? He's got the size. He's got this natural know-how to play the game of basketball, and he's got like the NBA bloodline. So he's checking a lot of boxes that I think NBA front offices are going to like. Again, I keep referencing pre-injury. This was a young man who just shows such a natural ability to score the basketball. I think he's a can't-miss talent.
I had him in the lottery, I think at my very early thing, which I haven't updated in 2 weeks. I had him at 13. So I had him in that sort of arrangement. There are a few things I'm going to change in that list. But yeah, there's a lot that's intriguing there. It's just some of it is like the lower steal rate, the low usage, some of the stuff propped up by insane shooting, which was always going to drop off. But yeah, there is everything we love about the size and the huge wingspan and the positionality. All that sort of stuff is awesome. And I think that does lend us a pretty large cushion, or at least benefit of the doubt for a lot of the things that we think that Cody can do.
If I may, real quick, Josh, I think that the weaknesses that he has, I spoke to the rebounding. The numbers weren't really high. Sometimes he struggled to finish through contact. I think that with added weight, and again, kind of going back to the whole Jalen Williams thing, if he can put on this like strength and weight and things like that we've saw from him, I think that that really frees up a lot of the weaknesses that he had.
All right, we got Steven's camera issue fixed. I'm not even sure how long he was frozen for, but he's back, and we're ready to go for this next player now. It is Hunter Sallis out of Wake Forest. We talk a lot, or I've talked a lot with other guys about, have you got a certain skill? Have you got one thing that you're good at? And some players may only have one good thing in their arsenal, one thing that projects to the NBA level. And with Hunter Sallis, I think we just have to start and talk that he's a shooter. That's what he is. He's a guard. He's 21 years of age. He's decent usage, solid three-point attempt rate, but he's a three-point shooter. He's a 40% three-point shooter. The other stuff, well, maybe that gets brushed to the side a little bit, but I'll start with the shooting. Is this like a legitimate NBA shooter? Because we've had guys who were 40% shooters in college, older prospects, Ochai Agbaji, they come into the NBA and they can't shoot at all, and they're really not doing anything. Is this a legit shooter? Is this is what he does? He can shoot. He'll get up. Malik Beasley volume 3s. Is that what he has to hone in on, or is this like a fake shooter?
I think that Hunter is a real shooter, and I've been really high on him throughout this process because he he came into Gonzaga a couple years back. A lot of people might not even remember this, but he was a part of the same recruiting class as Chet Holmgren and was like a consensus top 15 prospect, like throughout all recruiting outlets. And it was because he was such a talented offensive player, and he also had like some defensive intensity too. And we got to see a lot of the defensive stuff at Gonzaga, but because of the system that Gonzaga runs, it's not necessarily like to accentuate good guard skill. You know, I mean, they had Drew Timme. Of course, they're bringing in Chet Holmgren. Hunter was relegated to basically being like a connective player who could also give you good guard minutes. And we've kind of seen the same thing with Nolan Hickman of that same program. I'm just excited, though, that we got to see him go to Wake. And I'm kind of calling Wake Forest like second chance U because of what we've seen them do with players like Alondas Williams, players of that ilk. And we've got to see like Hunter kind of be a little bit more experimental on the perimeter. And he's showing more of that offensive repertoire that we were hopeful to see whenever he originally committed to Gonzaga.
Because when you look at his numbers, it's pretty wild because he had the 2 seasons at Gonzaga, only got about 1,000 minutes across those 2 years, but he shot under 30% from 3 total and in each individual season. And so like the total attempts that he took in those 1,050 minutes, he took 62 threes. This season, in 1,200 minutes, about 150 extra minutes, he's up to 185 threes. So about triple the amount of threes, and he hit them at 40%. So on one hand, I go, you couldn't shoot, and then you could. Is this real? Does this hold? But the fact that then you are encouraged to just go ham in terms of how much you're shooting shows a level of improvement, or that scheme thing that does sort of unlock some of that shooting. So the free throw shooting's always been pretty strong from him. The touch indicators are okay, but it is a stark difference. But I'm glad you were able to highlight why that may have been the case with that changeover between the two schools. Because immediately to me, those guys who Davion Mitchell, can't shoot, 40% drafted, I can't shoot again, and I go, that's like not great. So you're not on that side of things. You're on like, no, this is actually, it was being held back by developmental stuff and scheme, and this is more the real Hunter Sallis.
Exactly. I mean, and we've got to see him operate with the ball in his hand. And again, he was same recruiting class with Nolan Hickman. So not only are you going to a system that is going to play through 2 bigs, Julian Strother was also there. And he also, like, he made a name for himself from being a lights out shooter. So you're kind of going into a big pond as a little fish, so to speak. Even though you were highly regarded as like a top recruit, we see this play out all the time in schools. And it took him being able to transfer out to Wake Forest, where Coach Steve Forbes is, like I said, he's done great work with guys like Jake LaRavia as well, Bobby Klintman, whenever he was there before he went to the NBL. So I think just Hunter being able to touch the ball and operate in more of an NBA type scheme like Wake Forest would run, you got to see him get a feel for the game. His shots were more difficult to some degree because he's doing some self-creation, but he's having the game flow through him a lot more at Wake Forest. And we see sometimes shooters, they need to touch the ball. Even if they're not going to shoot, they want to touch it and move it along because they feel like they're a part of the system. And Hunter goes from being kind of a part of a system to being the system. And again, I'm happy that we got to see him tap into that top 15 potential, because not only did he develop into a good shooter, I mean, he's fantastic in the pick and roll as well. I think that he could be kind of like a secondary creator if everything hits right for him, to where you're looking at this guy who's like 6'5", a good body control, has good decel to his game as well. Does a lot of great things with the ball in his hand, including the shooting, but the growth as a playmaker as well, I think really stood out to me this year.
Let's go to the next guy. We're going to talk about another guard here, smaller school prospect, Isaiah Crawford, who, again, is playing down at Louisiana Tech. He's a 6'6" wing. He's an older prospect, averaged over 20 points per 40 minutes. He's 22 years of age. Talking about a guy that you can play shooting guard, play small forward, but initially, look at this here. 26% three-point attempt rate, cool. 54 field goal, not bad. 26 usage, okay. That's a pretty good number. You're getting a lot of the ball. And then you look at the defensive numbers. You go, what the hell is this? 2.6 steals per 40, 2.1 blocks per 40 for a 6'6 wing. That's outrageous, like especially the block numbers. So we look at this and we go, all right, I don't even care about the other stuff at this point. So what is this player? 6'6", he's a wing, but he's blocking shots at power forward center numbers. Is he just an undersized big man? Is he an outrageous weak side rim protector? Are these fake block numbers like Keegan Murray put up in college, and then he's had about 3 blocks in 2 years in the NBA? Like, what do we make of that?
I think it's important to kind of first, before I go crazy, because I love Isaiah Crawford, he's done it all at Louisiana Tech, so there is a little bit of this, well, I would like to see him do it against higher competition. So I want to just put that out there first. But Isaiah Crawford has been on NBA radars for a couple of years now, Josh. The biggest thing with him is that he suffered 2 pretty serious knee injuries. It kind of, he played his freshman year, sophomore year, season-ending knee injury. Comes back for a year, has a good bounce-back year. The following year, season-ending knee injury. And then he strings along 2 consecutive, really productive seasons in college. And I think that NBA teams are finally more comfortable saying, all right, let's bring you along. Let's see what you look like up close. He goes to the Portsmouth Invitational Tournament this year, does fantastic, does so good that NBA teams don't even invite him to the combine, which might seem counterintuitive, but that's more of like a strategic thing. But watching this guy play, you mentioned the block stuff and what is this player? He is kind of like a skeleton key on both sides of the ball for Louisiana Tech, because even though he's listed at 6'6", he has a plus 7 foot wingspan. So he's able to play the 2, 3, and 4, and will defend the 2, 3, and 4, depending on who the best player on the opposite team is. He shot nearly 40% for 3 straight seasons, albeit not on the greatest sample size. The last 2 years were actually at 40%. The block and steal percentages are real. Yeah, there's no escaping this. This is what he is known for, as being a lights out defensive player. But what stands out is the fact that, Louisiana Tech would have the offense flow through him. So he does have that connective ability as well. I classify him more as a forward because he does have the strength and the length to be able to guard up and down the lineup. But he's my favorite sleeper in this class, Josh. I have him at 45, and there's not a lot of sleepers in this class, really, so to speak. So take that with a grain of salt, if you will. But he just does so much on the floor. He just has the injury history, and he has the small school, want to see it against higher levels of competition. But Josh, I think the indicators are that NBA teams love this guy because he, like I said, he did good in Portsmouth, didn't get an invite to the combine, but is remaining in the draft, which tells me that teams are promising this guy a second round pick at the latest.
You're not the only person who has told me that you are big on him. Like Brian Schroeder, who was on last week, was like, yeah, I'm really big on Isaiah Crawford. We didn't slot him in there, because other players we'll talk about with Brian, but he's like, I want to talk about either AJ Mitchell or Isaiah Crawford. I got to have one of those guys in there. And even if Crawford isn't a guy that generates big steals and big blocks in the NBA, and one of the other themes I've talked about all through this series of shows is when you're playing as an older player, yes, there are just reasons why he's a little bit older, but against these small schools, you have to kick their ass. You have to be dominant in all these areas, and having a high steal rate and a high block rate as a guy like this, that is kicking their ass. You need to do it. That is a great indicator for NBA success, even if it doesn't mean that he's an NBA shot blocker or even a guy that generates steals. And you talk about sample size on the threes, that's about 300 attempts that he's hitting at 40%, which is you want 600 as a great indicator of where someone's at, but 300 is still good. It's not 40. It's not 70. It's over 3 years. It's a big enough sample size where you feel a level of confidence in that. And I think also when you talk about a guy he does everything, so he's playing for Louisiana Tech, but that's still only 26 usage. So he's not just bludgeoning it by every single possession no one else is doing anything. 26 is a fine usage. That's a great number that doesn't set off a gigantic red flag for me, but then you're doing all this stuff in other spots. So I really like that. The injury stuff is a concern, but there are, outside of the age, which again we've talked about, there are so many positive indicators here that make you be like, I do hope that he gets that opportunity. We've seen these sort of players. Like, I won't say he's not the same player as like Vince Williams, but Vince Williams had a lot of statistical, really positive indicators coming out of the draft. Slid obviously and didn't get picked, and then two-way guy. But all those stuff, when you do all the pure statistical translation, like, it's Vince Williams doing at the top. Who's this bloke? No one's picking him. And it's I
loved Vince Williams too.
So there was a lot of people who said, look, Vince does these things. He does all these little things. Look at these numbers. They're unbelievable. But I'm not sure he's coming out of VCU. Well, who knows how it goes. And look where we are now. Right. So that's not to say that's always going to happen. But doing this and putting like the smackdown on your opponents, even though they're bad, like, you've got to kill them. And he does. And that is always something that I'm going to have a level, place a level of value on. So I am excited to see where Crawford is able to take this. Next guy, we are going to talk about the aforementioned Bobby Klintman. You spoke about how he was at Wake Forest last season. There were a lot of rumors draft time about Klintman, about teams promising him in the first round, and just didn't work out with the coaching at Wake Forest. Look what he did with the Swedish national team, and he's able to be a primary guy there, and then he's gone down to the NBL, and I don't know. I don't know where we're at with him. Like, the numbers are fine. Like, the per 40 numbers are okay. Like 18-9. 1.5 steals. He played 22 minutes a night in the NBL, which is more than Alex Sarr played. Obviously, different context. 50% three-point attempt rate, all really, really okay. Like, the block rate, not super high, but he hit his free throws at an unbelievably high rate. But it still remains a guy where I don't know. I don't know what this guy is. It's just there's so much bouncing around, which at some point you can use as a positive. Well, he's never settled. He's never had the same scheme. He's always moving around trying to get settled in. But at some point you got to go, then why is he moving around? Like, what the hell are you playing for 5 teams in 4 years? Like, what's going on with all this? So, Klintman was maybe a first rounder last season, but took his name out. Do you think he is a first rounder this year?
I think he is, but I think that the draft talk and the buzz that I'm hearing and that I'm privy to, he's kind of all over the map, like so many of these prospects, right? There's some teams that are really into him, and there's some teams that are kind of like you, Josh, that are like, what's going on with all the decision stuff? But the good news is for Bobby is that he interviews incredibly well. You know, I had the pleasure of speaking with him last year, and just very enthusiastic. Like, when you talk to him, you can't help but smile type guy. So he's going to interview very well, and he's built for the NBA. Like, he looks like an NBA player when you see him on the floor. So between those two things, he's obviously had fans in front offices. It's just he felt, not speaking for him, but it looks like he kind of felt like he had options to go out and maybe try to improve that draft stock. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. But I do think that his NBL season definitely is spun as a positive to me, because, he didn't go to a situation where he was going to get the ball in his hands. I think that if he really wanted to boost his draft stock in terms of like on-ball creation, he would have did pretty much anything else but the NBL, right? Because he went there and just immediately was like a hard-nosed defensive player, off-ball mover, an absolute nightmare in transition. Just anytime that he is in the open court, teams, like, you almost have to count it as a loss whenever he's got to step on anybody, because no one's catching him, right? I was actually pleased in the combine that he measured in to be close to that 6'10" number that Wake Forest listed him as, because for whatever reason, the NBL site, for Cairns that he played for, had him listed at 6'8", and I was like, oh, that's kind of takes a little bit away from the intrigue with him, But the vertical number for the combine was 32.5-inch vert, which isn't sexy, and that actually bore itself out in the film, because while he is good in transition, he's never really been like an explosive athlete. It's more of like a straight line guy with a little bit of physicality. And if you look at what he did on the glass, he did well in the NBL rebounding, but at Wake Forest as a freshman, he's 6.2 offensive rebound percentage, 19.4 defensive rebound percentage. He did shoot well at Wake from beyond the arc at 36.8%. Only shot about 33% for Cairns, like what we saw. And you mentioned he was 81.3% from the free throw line. So I do think that Bobby's going to be able to space the floor. I do like his defensive know-how. And I do like the fact that we've seen him at multiple contexts where, for the Swedish national team, he was fantastic. And then he goes to Sunrise Christian playing with a lot of other really good NBA level prospects and performs well there. Goes and gets some D1 experience at Wake and kind of takes the draft community by storm, and then rounds out his kind of like role player, everything else aspect to his game in the NBL. I value that immensely. And then again, you're getting like a 6'10" guy who can run the floor like he does, who can cut extremely well off the ball, set screens, run the floor with anybody that you want. I think once you get to the back half of the first round, he becomes like a can't miss talent, in my opinion.
So we look at Klitman, like he's 6'10", he looks like a power forward, right? Like that's just what he looks like. But is he a guy that can shift up and play center? Or is he a four that with high 3-point attempt rate and some shooting ability, does he shift down and play the three in smaller or in bigger lineups? So like similar to the way that Jalen Johnson is able to do. So which one is he going to be able to play at center? Or is he going to be more like we can get a bit more size out here on the perimeter?
I think he's more of a 3-4, but I would be kind of scared to rule out the 5 depending on the team context, because you almost could kind of see him taking on like a Jeff Green type center role, although Jeff Green was obviously way more dynamic as a vertical lob threat. But I do think, kind of what we saw from the veteran Jeff Green, who still could dunk on people, but not as poppy as what he used to be. Maybe you could kind of talk yourself into him being a 5 in that sense, but I like him more as a 3-4 type athlete.
Jeff wasn't really able to do that until he got 32, 33, like put on more of that strength.
Old man strength.
Exactly. Get that strength in there, get the positioning to take away lanes and angles from guys without just relying upon length or athleticism. Like he wasn't really able to do that at all until he developed that experience and put on all that strength. So that's 10 years away plus for Klitman. So that's a good comparison. I do like the Jeff Green comparison as a size thing, and even that the stretchability of what Bobby is able to do is really it's really quite interesting to me. And I was really intrigued with him last season as well. I would have hoped he could have pushed up a little bit further, but when the Knicks have got 2 picks in the middle of the 20s and they have no forwards on their team, so having someone like that who can develop some stretchiness and have some size, that's a sort of player that should be really interesting to guys and teams in that zone. I think it'd be interesting to see what he's able to do, and we just hope he can get a little bit of settled Klitman instead of the guy that's all over the shop every single season.
Sure. Yeah, and I think that the Knicks pick is interesting. There's a number of people who you could imagine going there, but what I think Bobby did to help his coach Thibodeau's stock, if you will, is that he did develop into like a really enthusiastic, high motor type player away from the ball. And what we're seeing from the Pacers, like how do you think that Bobby would fare against like an Obi Toppin, if they had that type of matchup? I think that Tibbs would love to have another weapon like that to throw into that lineup.
One more guy we're going to talk about. We're going to go to Cal. We're going to look at Jalen Tyson, a guy whose name, honestly, through most of the college season, I didn't really hear a huge amount of because I'm not as deep into it. But as of late, I'm always trying to keep an eye on the way that people are talking and the guys who seem to be getting mentioned all the time. And this is one of them. His name is just always seemingly around at the moment. I really like Jalen Tyson. This is interesting about Jalen Tyson. He's a 21-year-old 6'6" wing/guard, 22 and 8 per 40, 4 assists, 1.4 steals, 30 usage play up, good free throw rate, hits his free throws, solid efficiency. Just like this sort of a guy who's got good size as a guard, just does a bunch of things that are interesting. So why do you think he is, and maybe you don't agree with me, but why do you think there is this sort of buzz pushing on Tyson at the moment?
I totally agree with it. I wrote about him. I mentioned him in the segment that I did called the Rescoutables, where I looked at players who weren't necessarily high on big boards at the time, whose film I just loved. And I did that way early in the season. I kind of had him as a second rounder. And then we fast forward to the latter end of the season. All of a sudden, he's just kind of taken off. And I think what did it for him was that he did transfer out of Texas Tech to California, to where he kind of had to become like their offensive engine because Cal's offense just wasn't that great, right? And I don't think that's going to be the role that's going to be asked of him in the NBA. But, Josh, we know that role players in the NBA were at one point like the guy on their schools, right? So I think that it was important for Jalen to be like the offensive engine, because once you become a role player, it becomes easy to facilitate for the star because you know what they want, because at one point you wanted it from somebody else, right? So I think that when that role scales down, he's NBA wing size, like legit NBA wing size. He's not like this 6'5" where kind of too tall to be a guard. So you kind of have to put him out there on the wing, but doesn't have like wing skills. He's legit like a 6'7" wing who has a bit of a handle, who is really strong, looks strong, which is what you want to see from these upperclassmen whenever they are playing in college, right? So he looks the part of an upperclassman who can translate, and he can just flat out shoot the ball, man. He was in the 64th percentile on catch and shoots, 76th percentile on dribble jumpers. To me, he looks like he's a better athlete on film than what the 36.5-inch vert suggested in the combine. It's kind of like, football players, they look faster on film than they do in a 40 or in a combine. That's kind of how I feel about him there. I do worry about a little bit of the defensive consistency from the Cal footage in particular. But if you rewind the tape back to, say, Texas Tech, when he wasn't on the ball as much, he was actually a much better, more impactful defender. So I think NBA teams are going to see the offensive production and the leap in usage and role in Cal, and they're going to love that. And they're going to rewind the tape back to Texas Tech and say, okay, because we're not going to have the offense flow through Jalen, we can expect to have this level of defender whenever he laces up for our organization. And he's been interviewing phenomenally well, by the way.
You blew up my next question, because that's exactly what I was going to say, because you can look at this and go, well, the steal percentage is under 2. We want to get that over 2. But when he wasn't a usage guy, when he was not playing that role, then his steal rate was through the roof. Like, it was 2.8, and then he didn't play much in his first year at Texas, but 4.6. Like, he just did different things. And you're right about those role players scaling back, or NBA role players being high-level usage guys in college is a very common thing, but he's got that experience of doing those different things. And I love a sort of a player who can find whatever the right niche is and scale up or scale down. And you need me to handle the ball and pass a bit? Sure. You want me to shoot more? Sure, I'll do that. You want me to defend more? Sure, I'll do that. You want me to be the guy that takes all the shots? Absolutely. Like, having that ability to move up and down the importance spectrum, I guess, on a team is so key. And like, not that he'll ever necessarily have the high level 30 usage role in the NBA, but occasionally you need to do it. And there's someone like, you talked conference finals before, like Andrew Nembhard does that. There are times when someone's out and Nembhard goes, all right, you want me to do stuff? I'll do it. I still don't think he's necessarily always going to be that number one guy, but there are other times when the guys around him are playing and Halliburton's there and he goes back and has like 12 usage and just does the little things, and that ability to push it up, where there is guys like Patrick Williams, for example, that when given those opportunities, he does the same thing every single time. And it's like, bro, can you like show some urgency or like step up into this role that's been carved out for you? I will throw a name out for you in terms of, again, back to that advanced comparison side. The number one name that came up is a guy that is sort of moved into that role in the NBA in terms of being a role player who was a high usage guy, almost 30% usage guy in college. But I wouldn't have thought most people would think these guys are similar, but their stats do compare. And that's Ayo Dosunmu, who was 30% usage at Illinois, high assist rate, 29% assist rate, really good, or similar steal numbers. But in the NBA, he's pulled that usage way back. He's focuses more on defense, but then when players went out, he was able to push it up at the end of the season. So like, I don't think many people would look at those two guys and go, yeah, Dosunmu and Jalen Tyson, bang, there we are. But that's intriguing to me, just thinking about the context behind both of those players and the way that Dosunmu's game has changed in the NBA.
I actually really like the comparison to Ayo Dosunmu. I don't think that Tyson is going to get anywhere near amount as like a ball in hand usage or anything like that. But it is interesting to think back to like how he played at Illinois. Ball was in his hand all the time, right? You didn't necessarily get to see his complementary level skills that he ended up having. But when he got to Chicago, he kind of was able to play off of other people, and that growth as a three-point shooter that we saw him have in Illinois, that really has kind of like bore itself out a little bit for the Bulls. For Jalen, I love the aspect of him just being like a completely off-ball guy who has the experience with the ball in his hand, to where you can trust when he is chased off the line, Josh, that he's going to make the right read. He can either attack the basket or he can engage the defense, like on a collapsing, converging defense around him, that he's going to make that next pass over type of move. And one thing that I think is important to discuss for translatability for these players is rebounding, right? We talked about the strength with Jalen, but the rebounding stands out too. I mean, this guy is crashing offensive glass as well as like the lead guy. So to me, that speaks to not only his ability or his length or his metrics or anything like that, but the character of the guy too, right? That your star player is attacking the glass. That means that the coach holds everybody accountable when they're not doing their job, because if Tyson is doing it, then nobody has an excuse to not play with that same level of intensity. And so to me, you're drafting like a player, but also a person, and you trust that Jalen is going to, make the best of whatever opportunity he's going to get, because he's showing it on the glass. He's showing it as a playmaker, showing it as a shooter, as a defender. He used to show it at Texas Tech. So you kind of, you want to trust in that a little bit. I just think that he does so many things well on the floor. He obviously has holes. I wish that he was a better finisher in the paint, that he could handle contact a little bit more. But again, I have him like 14th. I think that at the back end of the lottery that you can get an NBA wing with size, like NBA wing size, that can do all of the things that he does. To me, it makes absolute sense that a team would want to bring someone like that along.
Yeah, look, I'm not going to lie. Like I'm getting sold a little bit on this. Just some of those things that I really enjoy about players, and whether I don't know if I'll have him 14 or where I'll have him, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to have him as a first round guy, maybe a top 20 guy. Just that ability to do all these different things, and again, it's about recalibrating expectations in a draft like this. Like that's just super valuable to be able to do all these different things and be a 10-year career NBA role player. Like if that's even your upside, then that's awesome. That's so good to be able to get a player like that who does all those different things and shown an ability in different spots and different contexts, which is really key for a role player as well, because context will change all the time. Stephen, that was awesome for you to come on and discuss all these players with us again for the second year in a row here, talking about the NBA draft. What is cracking for you guys, or you in particular, over at No Ceilings at the moment?
Well, Josh, thanks so much, man, for having me on. I've said this the last time I was on the show, but I've listened to you for a while. So the fact that I'm on the show, man, it's a badge of honor. I almost feel like I can retire. But for myself at No Ceilings, I have an Isaiah Crawford piece over there. So y'all got to hear me talk about him a little bit. I wrote like 4,800 words on the guy. So please feel free to go to noceilingsnba.com and read that. I'm going to have a Devin Carter piece coming out soon where I'm comparing him to all of the NBA guards that have made, all defensive teams over the past few years. I stopped like right before Chris Paul, because why would I compare Devin Carter to Chris Paul? But pretty much everyone before the Chris Paul timeframe, I'm Marcus Smart, Drew Holiday, all those, they're in the mix there too. But we have that. I know that everybody, you had Corey and Tyler on. I'll continue to pump out. Please subscribe to noceilingsnba.com, because here soon we're going to have, mock drafts again. We're going to have our big boards again. Our draft guide is coming out soon. All of our assignments for that have been turned in. So I'm very excited to get that product out. And then our YouTube is actually hitting major strides as well. So if you go to YouTube and look up No Ceilings NBA, please join the No Ceilings universe over there. We would love to have all of the NBA fans and fantasy basketball fans come over there and learn up on some of these rookies that y'all are going to get to know.
You're going to have a link in this in the YouTube show notes here as well to No Ceilings and the YouTube channel. So go and check that out over there. Stephen, once again, thank you for coming on and chatting about the draft with me.
Love being on, man. Thanks for having me.
That was great. Another discussion on the NBA draft. I remember back, I think it was right when COVID hit, where I was like, what am I going to do? So I hosted I don't know, this is a seminar where I was like, hey, any of you guys want to get into industry, doing podcasts, doing videos, talking about the NBA, I'm going to host a free sort of, it was like a seminar, it was a talk, but it was basically just people roundtable asking me questions. And Stephen was one of the guys that came into that and asked a bunch of questions in there. And then he was able to get on his journey and join up with No Ceilings and start producing content that way. So I remember him from back, all that way back 4 or 5 years ago, from watching the show and being a part of that roundtable that I did back then, just talking about the things that we do in creating content and being someone that people want to listen to and watch. And I think that's come through in the stuff that he does, but you don't need to hear me yapping about that. What you do need to do, though, is hit the thumbs up on the subscribe button over on YouTube, if that's where you are. And if you're on the audio side, well, you double bang, of course. and you hit the old 5-star review, and then you subscribe. But guys, I reckon that will do it. In fact, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.